Today we're looking at the 7 most unique commanders and their decks.
I'm Mia, and I can talk really fast.
I'm BZ, I lost a bet, and if you want to know why I'm wearing this stupid hat, you have to go watch our 4-minute Aether Drift pre-con video, but we're sponsored by Card Kingdom. That's the best place to go. You can't buy propeller hats there, but you can buy Magic the Gathering singles, which is probably what you're more interested in anyway. Once you go to the site, they take care of it all for you. We've got recommendations from us specifically. That's what our link in the description will take you to. And you are helping support the channel while buying from an awesome website.
They even have apparel like their new Doom and Bloom hoodie, so you should go check that out. Use our link. We're also sponsored by Dragon Shield, best sleeves in the multiverse.
Good sleeves.
If you use the code
NERDS
at checkout, you can save 5% of your real May Talks dollars on your entire order, which includes a bunch of cool new matte sleeves, but you can also buy our sleeves on Dragon Shield. If you type in Nitpicking Nerds in the search box or you use our link, you can get our custom designs.
That's Amber as the Monarch or the Nitpicking Nerds logo straight from the site. There's no need to like make them yourself or get them from us or whatever. Just get them from Dragon Shield, and the best part is, while you're getting them for a nice price, you're also supporting the channel directly at this. There's so many things happening, and we love it, and we are really excited to roll out these new sleeves with Dragon Shield.
We're also sponsored by Moxfield, but not now. A lot later or soon. You won't be able to guess. And we have a Patreon. If you want to support us directly and get some of your decks featured on the show like John and Blitzflix, you should go check it out because there are a bunch of awesome perks that you can't get anywhere else.
So today we are looking at the 7 most unique commanders, and this is sort of a part 2 to a video that Joe and I made like 2 or 3 years ago now. But that video was all about looking at the most unique decks, the decks that you don't really see replicated anywhere else. This, we're going to take a little spin on it. We're talking about the commanders that have the most unique text boxes, and then we're going to talk about what their decks look like. So I'm super excited, and do you have anything before we start?
I feel like there are so many commanders that kind of blend together at times when it's like, okay, this gives +1/+1. This can make copies or something.
Oh,
but
Kindred, yeah.
Yeah, but these are super unique and super special to themselves. So let's get started with the first one. The first commander on our list is Magar of the Magic Strings. 1 black-red for a 3/3. If you pay 1 black-red, you note the name of target instant or sorcery in your graveyard and put it on the battlefield face down. It's a 3/3 that says, whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, you could create a copy of the card with the noted name. You can cast the copy without paying its mana cost, and if this creature would leave the battlefield, exile it instead of putting it anywhere else. This is a super weird commander that is very political, and make sure you also plays a lot of instants and sorceries so you can make them into creatures and get their effects.
I didn't even think this card was legal. I thought it was an Acorn Infinity card until Nerd Girl played it in our most recent gameplay episode when I realized, no, this is actually just a black bordered, normal commander legal card that exists, and there's nothing in the rules text that, you know, Magic can't already accomplish. Some of the other stuff is like, oh, play with your hand face down as a 2/2. Sure, Magic can't do that, but this is actually fully supported by the rules, and it is a weird card to read. And Nurgle showed us a little bit of what this card can do. It's a very interesting thing. You want to dump big splashy spells in the graveyard, and then there's even like a little bit of a political aspect because you know what each card is representing, and then it hits, you get the effect. But let's just start talking about what this weirdo deck is trying to do. First, you want to get stuff in the graveyard, and that's going to be through things like Cathartic Reunion. That's 1 red sorcery. As an additional cost to cast it, you discard 2 cards, and you draw 3 cards. You dump the stuff that's unusable, uncastable into the zone that Magar wants it.
It is so important to be able to fill your graveyard, and getting 3 cards is such a nice bonus. There's also Key to the City, 2 mana for an artifact, tap it, discard a card. Up to 1 target creature can't be blocked this turn. Whenever this artifact becomes untapped, you can pay 2 if you do draw a card. I really like this because it's multifaceted. One of them being getting cards in your graveyard from your hand, which is super nice, making sure things can't be blocked so you can get the effects of the 3/3s that Magar puts out, and then just being able to draw cards if you have a bit of mana left over.
It's so perfect because you want to dump the things early, and then once you have, I don't know, some big spell that we'll get to, don't worry, we talk about those too. Once you have that face down, you go, cool, discard some other chaff, a land, whatever, and attack you and get it through and then cast whatever the thing is. It's so sweet. I love this deck because it is just the weirdest confluence of effects, but you're like, oh, it kind of all works together. One of the other complete weirdos that I think is perfect for this deck is Ancient Cellar Spawn, which I think it seems like a pretty good card, and I think we keep talking about it, so expect to see more of this guy going forward. He's 1 black for a 3/4 enchantment creature. Each spell you cast that's a demon, horror, or nightmare costs 1 less to cast. We're not super interested in that, but we are interested in whenever you cast a spell, if the amount of mana spent to cast it was less than its mana value, target opponent loses life equal to the difference. So if you cast something for free and it costs 6 mana normally, they just lose 6 life and you don't spend any mana on this exchange.
I like this a lot. This is super awesome, and I would love to see this in combination with like a Bolus's Citadel or something super wacky like that. Maybe if you have a little bit of cascade action in your deck, that would be super cool.
Yeah, Ancient Silver Spawn kind of goes ham when you cast spells for free, and Magar is super interested. It's also like an early blocker. You play it and make sure you affect the board, and then late game you just start sending in those weird 3/3s. I don't even know what to call them. They're not tokens. They're not instants and sorceries.
They're like face down guys.
Morphed spells, kind of. But one other interesting aspect to this is not even necessarily tied to, putting 1,000 cards in your graveyard or, casting some 9-drop. What about Curtain's Call? It's just 5 and a black for an instant. It costs 1 less for each opponent, and you destroy 2 target creatures. You don't need Cathartic Reunion. You just cast this spell. Destroy the 2 best things in play. Then you use Magar to bring it back, and you talk to, hey, Mia, would you like to destroy 2 creatures of your choice that aren't mine? I'm going to hit you with this 3/3. If you let it through, you get to choose which creatures I blow up. And that unlocks this whole political wrinkle to this deck.
I also like how you're like, well, what if we just played Curtain's Call? Like, we haven't pitched that on this channel multiple times. Curtain's Call is a very good deck, but because you're chipping in and just making all these political deals, you can get things off the board that you wanted to begin with. Also, I do love the fact that this deck hits a little bit of everything. Do you want damage, like combat damage? Fair. Well, you're going to have to chip in with these people and they're losing their life, even though they're getting real value from the spells that you're casting. Do you want things removed? Well, you're packing your deck with a lot of removal because this is Rakdos. I feel like this has so many options that you can go with this deck, and it's super cool.
Yeah, and Nurgle actually told us herself too, shout out to Nurgle, that she was like, yeah, most of the time people just let you hit them with things like a Curtain's Call. Why wouldn't they do that? I'll take 3 damage to choose which 2 creatures die. That's perfect for me. And then, whoever's playing this deck is just like, great, thank you, dance puppet. This is perfect.
But we can't talk about casting things for free without talking about one of my favorite spells to cast, whether you have to pay for it or you get it for free. It's Breach the Multiverse. 5 black for a sorcery. Each player mills 10. For each player, choose a creature or planeswalker from their graveyard. Put those cards onto the battlefield under your control, and each becomes a Phyrexian in addition to their other types. The last part doesn't really matter, but I do love the fact that you're getting a bunch of stuff into the graveyard, which can be really good for you. You take something from everyone. If this could hit multiple times, I would absolutely love that. But the creatures or planeswalkers that you take don't have to be out of the cards you've milled. They can just be things that died early in the game or that your opponents milled for themselves.
Yeah, realistically, it's not crazy to go turn 2, Cathartic Reunion, pitch this. We're not casting it on turn 7. We want to cast it earlier. Magar on turn 3. Turn 4, you animate Breach as a 3/3, and then you connect with it on turn 5, and boom, you just get a 0 mana Breach the Multiverse. I also like that while Magar is the centerpiece of this deck, once he animates a spell, he can die. It's fine. The spell has all the same qualities, and we can still connect and get Breach the Multiverse for free. One of them's good. A 0 mana Breach is probably close to game over, but once you start connecting again, what are they going to do?
Yeah, I feel like with this deck, you do need Magar to not be countered. But yeah, as you mentioned, those still stay as creatures afterwards, so you don't have to have him on the field for too long if you have some sort of win con that you can keep hitting with.
Yeah, and I guess just to reiterate, because I didn't get this on my first read, if I hit you with a Breach the Multiverse 3/3 and I cast Breach the Multiverse, I still have the 3/3 and I can keep doing it. That part to me makes this very snowbally.
And the next spell is so much better to cast when it's 0 mana. It's Blood for the Blood God. 8 black for an instant, but it costs 1 less to cast for each creature that died this turn. Discard your hand, draw 8. It deals 8 damage to each opponent, and you exile it. But if it's in the graveyard, you're just going to be making a copy of it, and if you can hit multiple times, that's a ton of damage to all your opponents. That's filling up your hand as many times as you really need, as many times as you can hit. And it doesn't exile itself. I feel like when I see this in other decks, when you can't cast it for free and you're just hoping for a lot of things to die, or you're just trying to sack a bunch of things, it's still hard to cast that because it's so much mana. But being able to cast it for free and just hitting it for 3 damage makes it a lot more worth.
Yeah, and it does exile itself, but the token copy doesn't care. It's like, okay, here's the Blood for the Blood God. That's a token, a fake copy. It doesn't matter where that thing goes afterward, it just ceases to exist. And the original still nestled safely under the 3/3 basically. So Bluff of the Blood God just on repeat. Yeah, it's pretty good. It also like discards other big things that you don't want in your hand that you can put in your graveyard for Magar. So it kind of works out perfectly. But my favorite spell in this deck, and I think a spell that just creates infinite combos, is Rise of the Eldrazi. It is stone uncastable. Don't cast it. It's a sorcery. It can't be countered. Destroy target permanent. Target player draws 4 and take an extra turn after this one. But the downside is you have to exile Rise of the Eldrazi. What if it was under a 3/3? Now the 3/3 hits somebody. I get to cast Rise of the Eldrazi. That's already a pretty good start. Take an extra turn. Keep my 3/3 that can hit you again. Remove a blocker that you may have or somebody else may have. And now, oh no, exile Rise of the Eldrazi. It doesn't matter. That like gives you infinite turns / combats / you win the game because there's just no stopping it.
It's just so nasty. You do like turn 1 Entomb or something, you find this, and then you get Magar out turn 2 or 3, depending on how much mana acceleration you have. And then you could start hitting with this. Oh my god, that just stops the game immediately in its tracks.
It really is game over. As long as one person doesn't have blockers, you just keep hitting them until they're dead, and you're getting an Ulamog trigger to blow something up, which clears the way for other blockers. You're drawing a million cards. Not that it matters because the game's already over, but the extra turns will just win you the game. You can even mill somebody out by forcing them to draw 4 if you really want to. But Rise of the Eldrazi, super funny in this deck. Definitely could take it up a notch too, because now you got to be super careful about Magar because you might lose to it. Next up is a card that cares more about suspending than pretty much any other commander. It's the 10th Doctor. It's 3 red blue for a 5/3/5 and has Alonzi. Whenever you attack, exile cards from the top of your library until you exile a non-land card. Put 3 time counters on it, and it gains suspend if it doesn't have suspend. And it also has timey-wimey, 7 time travel 3 times, activate only as a sorcery. That is either removing counters from suspended cards or adding counters to, I think, vanishing cards, that kind of thing. It keeps your stuff around that you want longer, or it reduces the amount of time you have to wait for things. What? This is like the weirdest bunch of stuff tacked on. And you might be asking, Beezy, how are you planning on attacking every turn? Because 10th Doctor is like, it's a 5-mana 3/5, but you want to attack the turn you play it. Well, he's usually accompanied by Rose Tyler, who is 1 and white for a 2/2, gets +1/+1 for each time counter on it, and whenever she attacks, put a time counter on her for each suspended card you own and other permanents with time counters on it. So you're going to suspend a couple things turn 1 and 2, play her on turn 2 or 3, play the Doctor on turn 4 or 5, and then boom, she's just like hitting for 5 or 6 or something, and it's like very, very scary. So the 10th Doctor has like this janky quality where it's like, what's going on? But then Rose Tyler is just like, no, this is real.
I don't know. I feel like it's not as janky. I feel like before the 10th Doctor, it was pretty janky to be playing Suspend and all that stuff. But once the 10th Doctor came in, especially with Rose Tyler being able to hit with combat damage, I feel like it became a much more viable strategy.
This deck is real. This deck will mess you up, and there's a lot of cool stuff going on, like Inevitable Betrayal, which is a no-cost sorcery that you can't cast, but you can suspend it for 1 blue, and you search someone else's library for a creature and you just put it into play, then that player shuffles. And notably, there is a much cooler version of this card that you could be playing with Patrick Star on it from the SpongeBob Secret Lair.
I'm so happy that got a reprint. That was such a good one to be putting on there. It's like, I got you now, SpongeBob.
We quote that a lot, even before we knew about this reference. But now I'm going to play it just to quote it. But it's also a really good card in the deck because you're suspending it, and then the Doctor's going to remove counters, and you're just going to get this ridiculous spell. This is at least a 5-mana value effect, and you're going to get it for 3 or less sometimes.
I feel like this next card is a hallmark card of this deck, but it's a pretty confusing one. It's Sphinx of the Second Sun, 6 blue for a 6/6 with flying. At the beginning of each of your post-combat main phases, there's an additional beginning phase after this phase. I know we've had a lot of discussion on this channel and in the comments for this one, but do you want to give them a recap?
Yeah, I mean, I think I just have to read it again. At the beginning of each of your post-combat main phases, there is an additional beginning phase after this phase. Super, super weird, but basically on your second main, it triggers, and then at the end of your turn, the very last thing you do is untap, upkeep, draw. Then your turn's over. It's so bizarre, but this deck is super happy to have second upkeep, no matter when it is, even if it's weirdly at the end of the turn, and you can't necessarily cast a sorcery after that. Cool. We'll just remove all the stuff from our suspended things, and it's like we're taking 2 turns in that respect. So Sphinx is awesome for this deck. It's also a very large creature that the Doctor can spin into early and go, oh, cool. It's turn 6, and now instead of having to spend 8 mana on this later and waste my whole turn, I'll spend 0 on it, and I'll just wait 3 turns and actually like way less.
And I'll just put on a bunch of time counters or take stuff off if I really want.
And Rose is an 8/8, whatever.
Don't worry about it. It'll be fine.
Wars have been fought over how confusing that card is, but I think we got it right, and it's definitely good in this deck. So if you see it, just be scared of it. That's the easiest way to put it. Next up is Flaming Tyrannosaurus. 5 red for a 5/5 menace. Also, this is from the Doctor Who decks. Whenever you cast a spell from anywhere other than your hand, like exiling with Suspend, this creature deals 3 to any target and you get a counter on it. And then when this creature dies, it deals damage equal to its power to each opponent. So it's a threat on the battlefield, and as long as, if they keep it around too long, now it's an 8/8. They really want to take 8, but they might have no other choice.
I feel like every time I've seen this 10th Doctor Rose Tyler deck, there's just so many casting per spells. It's like, okay, I'll take 3 time counters off and okay, I guess that's 4 spells cast, and you're like noting it down, taking all the damage, figuring out how many counters on everything, because they just have so many things suspended that is just so many effects when they're able to put these on or take these off. Flaming Tyrannosaurus is going to be dealing a lot of damage to your opponents.
Yeah, they're going to always have
creatures.
Like 4 instants or sorceries or creatures, whatever, suspended, and then you're just going to have to keep track of when they all come off, and it feels like you can't really stop it, and it's like this inevitable thing. It's not like you can't just hold up 5 counter spells. You're going to have this moment where you're like, oh crap, Flaming Tyrannosaurus is coming down next turn, but so are these other 2 things. And then they have, the 7 mana ability of the Doctor that they can remove all the counters from everything else, and we're in big trouble. And Flaming Tyrannosaurus is one of the engine cards, probably one of the cards you need to kill first. If you can swords it, even better. But next up is a card you're pretty familiar with. It's a little fella, Rift Elemental, red for a 1/1. You can pay 1 in a red and remove a time counter from a permanent you control or suspended card you own, and it gets +2/+0.
As you guys may or may not know, I spec'd on this card earlier last year, I think maybe
when this set came out, right?
Or maybe the year before. I don't know. Time isn't real. But with this card, time is real, and because of that, I thought it would go up. It's penny stocks. I got it for 3 cents. It went up to 4 cents. Stonks.
And you sold, and now you're rich. Actually,
Absolutely.
we still have like 10 copies.
Yes.
Sitting around, so we're waiting to move on those. But Rift Elemental is such a crap card, but it ends up being perfect in this deck, and I think this is the perfect example of like this. The 10th Doctor specifically is such a unique card that it makes all of this other weird stuff make sense and actually makes you super scared of them. And I think it's a perfect design of the card.
Yeah, and it's really surprising to see the old Suspend Commander in here too, though I guess it's not that surprising. It's Driver of the Gitu, 1 blue-red for a 2/2 with pay 2, exile a non-land card from your hand, put 4 time counters on the exiled card. If it doesn't have Suspend, it gains Suspend. I was alluding to this earlier where it was a little bit jankier when you had her as the commander of your deck, but now that you have the 10th Doctor, you're able to take those time counters off a lot faster and actually get those engines moving.
Yeah, Joyro is definitely like a must kill. You have to like play her on turn 7 or something and then like suspend 2 Eldrazi. And the 10th Doctor definitely feels like an amped up version, especially because he's probably accompanied by Rose, who's just swinging for the fences on like turn 3. You're like, settle down, Rose. But she refuses to. So Joyro's going to go in this deck. It's perfect. I don't think this deck is necessarily like the suspend a 12 drop over and over a deck. I think it's just, hey, all my spells are like free on a delay, and the delay is like 1.5 turns.
Oh, I'm so sad about that. I have to wait 1.5 turns for all this mana of spells. But if you want mana, there's also Rousing Refrain, 3 red for a sorcery, but you're not going to be paying for that. You're going to suspend it 3 for 1 in red. Add red for each card in target opponent's hands until ended turn. You don't lose mana as steps phase, and exile it with 3 time counters on it. So this is going to stay in play for a very long time.
I think the main selling point with this, the clickbait that everybody was all excited about, that is definitely something to be considering when you're playing against 10th Doctor, is this goes infinite if you can generate 8 mana off of it or spend less mana with his activated abilities. So if you have like a Training Grounds and one opponent has 6 cards in their hand, you can just activate Timey-Wimey for 5, which will remove all 3 suspend counters from this. Boom, cast it for free. Now you get 6 mana, and it goes back with 3 time counters, and now you're just up a mana, and you just keep going for infinite mana, and then at that point, like, how are you losing?
I mean, that's such a good way to be getting infinite mana in here. I feel like infinite mana just isn't only reserved for the green decks anymore, and just for the artifact players. This is a great way to be doing it in Suspend.
It gives up another powerful way for this deck to go over the top, and, the game's going on for an hour and a half. Hey, guys, I'm going to win right now, for sure. And actually, 2 commanders in a row, we've had some kind of, like, infinite combo haymaker as the last card, now that I'm thinking about it. But let's go to our next commander. It's Yearlock of Scorched Thrash. Mana burn is real. 1 black, red, green for a 4/4 Vigi. A player losing unspent mana causes that player to lose that much life, and you can pay 1 and tap it to weirdly have each player add black, red, green, which is hopefully bad for them.
We got to bring the hurt for everyone else. You can use your mana. You get to activate it whenever you want, but everyone else, they just have to deal with it.
Yeah, so most likely you're going to activate it at a really inconvenient time for them. And ideally, they all take 3 whenever this happens because they can't spend the mana on an instant or anything. But this ends up being a weird hodgepodge of a bunch of different stuff. But we have never seen this text box on anything. There was nothing even close. At least in my memory banks, I got nothing for what is similar to Yearlock.
Well, I mean, mana burn was real for the first part of the game, so they didn't need that because it was just assumed. And now they're like, well, that doesn't make sense. Why would we ever do that? So this guy is just special. He's a cool little guy with a cool little ability.
Right, and then so the deck builders go, well, let's give opponents a bunch of inconvenient mana and see if we can just kill them with it by, drowning them in resources, like with Eladamri's Vineyard. It's green for an enchantment. At the beginning of each player's first main phase, they add green, green. It's not a May. Hope you can use it. If you're playing mono blue and you got pip intensive cards, I'm sorry, that just says take 2 damage.
I love doing the kill them with kindness. It's like the group hug, but not really. It's group slug at its best.
Too much of a good thing.
Overabundance, 1 red, green for an enchantment. Whenever a player taps a land for mana, they add 1 mana of any type that land produced, and this deals 1 damage to the player. So it's killing them with kindness, but also making them take damage from this, and if your lock's out, maybe also the mana too.
Yeah, I think it's tough with this deck. You're going to run into some problems. If some players are just going to go, oh, free mana, and then they're going to spend all their mana and cast a bunch of spells, and they're going to have card draw in their deck, and you're not going to run them out of resources, and you're just going to go, well, this sucks. But things like Overabundance do help punish them a little. All right, if you want to spend 12 mana, take a bunch of damage. At least you're closer to dying, and I can finish you off with some kind of Yearlock thing.
The next one is Citadel of Pain, 2 and a red for an enchantment. At the beginning of each player's end step, this enchantment deals X damage to that player, where X is the number of untapped lands they control. It's really forcing you to either tap your lands or just take damage. You're taking damage either way. Hello, Miso. I was calling him.
Yeah, Miso loves the group slug decks. He certainly does. Yeah, Citadel of Pain. It forces them to use it or lose it, and most people would like to use it, so I don't know if this land's going to end up dealing a ton of damage, but it is going to force them into weird spots and help make sure that shields are down for your turn, and they're going to hopefully just tap out and not deal with that. Next up is sort of a fireball. It's not infinite, but it is a lot of damage. It's Umbral Mantle. It's 3 for an artifact. Quick creature has 3 and untap. This creature gets +2/+2 until end of turn and equips for 0. So what you're going to do is equip to Yearlock. He says 1 tap. Each player adds 3. Cool. Now every one of my opponents has 3 mana. Hopefully this is just in the end step, where they're not going to be able to use it. So now that that's happening, I can use that 3 mana, and Yearlock's tapped, to untap him. The only problem is you have to pay 1 into this each time for the initial cost. So you can pay 1 mana on repeat to have each opponent add 3 mana over and over and over. And that's like a super mega fireball. So it doesn't have to go infinite. You can just kill people that way. And I almost think this is more fun and more fair that it is just a fireball and it doesn't go infinite.
Yeah, if you can make it infinite, though, I mean, you could Nyx Blue Ancient or something.
Some kind of double, yeah.
Yeah, it can be very powerful. But I feel like Umbral Mantle is one of those cards that's always at the centerpiece of infinite combos. It's very refreshing to see it not.
I think so. I think it's very refreshing to go, wow, we got to kill that, but not all right, guys, pack it up. Next up, I think this is more funny than good, but I have to shout out Radiant Lotus, a.k.a. Fireball. It's 6 mana for an artifact, and you can tap it and sack 1 or more artifacts. Choose a color. Target player adds 3 mana of the chosen color for each artifact sacrificed this way. I think this is a brand new addition. I didn't even really know. I was searching for stuff that might go in this deck, and I was like, wait a minute. If you got a bunch of treasures or crap laying around, you can throw them at somebody and force them to add 3 times that amount of mana. And I just think that's hilarious.
6 mana, but it is worth it. Unfortunately, you can't divide it very evenly, so every single time you tap it and sack 1 or more, if you have 10 clues laying around or something, you're just gonna have to all right, well, I guess you take 30 if you can't spend it right about now.
Yeah, and next up we start getting into the dubious territory. Play this at your own risk, although this is a common Yearlock card. What do we got?
This is Rite of Flourishing, 2 and a green for an enchantment. At the beginning of each player's draw step, they draw an additional card. Each player may play an additional land on each of their turns. This is just a standard group hug deck because you're giving them cards, you're giving them additional lands. Hopefully you can make it backfire on them, but giving them cards is just, I feel one of the things that's going to help them spend the mana that you're giving them.
The problem I have found playing with and against this card is that the extra land drop is kind of backbreaking. But if you're so all in on the give them extra mana such that they can't use it or they don't want to use it, this is maybe something to consider, but just be careful because Rite of Flourishing has killed many people that have cast it before. That's definitely true. But you can also go the opposite route. You can go Mana Barbs, and you play 3 in a red, and now whenever a player taps a land for mana, they take 1 damage. This is going to end the game in the next 4 turns, no matter what. They have to kill it. Obviously, if they kill it, they have free reign to play Magic again, but Mana Barbs is a scary one, and sometimes people can kill it, and they go, I think this is worse for my opponents, and you end up in a weird spot where you just stays in play.
Mana Barbs hurts me always so badly. I'm always playing 3 or 4 colors, and a lot of those are the pain lands, whether that be Mana Confluence or whether I'm playing Caves of Koilos, sorry Takasia. But because of that, it just racks up the damage. It just hurts so badly. It's like, okay, well, I guess if they stay untapped, I'm taking damage. If they stay tapped, I'm taking damage. If I'm tapping them for colors to play spells, I'm taking damage. This deck can just be very punishing, and it's a very cool take on Group Slug.
And if you're thinking, wow, Mana Barbs, that sounds pretty cool. Where can I buy that, BZ? I would recommend Card Kingdom because A, they have free shipping on orders $50 or more, but B, all the items you order are going to arrive in the same package and in a reasonable time frame because you can trust Card Kingdom, and we trust them all the time. So I would recommend using our link to support the channel and yourself.
And check out their apparel. The next commander is a commander that you want to build. It's the Capitoline Triad. 10 mana for a 7/7, but it costs 1 less to cast for each historic card in your graveyard, which is artifacts, legendaries, and sagas. Exile any number of historic cards from your graveyard with total mana value 30 or greater. You get an emblem that says, creatures you control have base power and toughness 9/9. Getting an emblem from a not planeswalker is super cool. Also seeing it on a colorless creature, really awesome.
And it's not an Eldrazi. I don't know, emblems are like some of my favorite things in Magic, and I love cards that make them without a ton of work. I think there could be more cards. I would love to see a sorcery that just makes an emblem, but I understand that maybe that's controversial. But either way, whatever. This is a very unique Magic card. Obviously, it makes an emblem. It's like permanent super mega overrun. So all you have to do is get 30 mana value of historic stuff in your graveyard, and then once you do that, you just, I don't know how you lose. As long as you have a board and they don't keep wiping you every turn, you're just going to kill them with anything.
Yeah, they're going to be gigantic 9/9s, and you can't really do anything about it. It's like the only thing you could do is really stifle that, but that's really easier said than done.
Yeah, so we got to talk about this deck because it has some of my favorite stinkers in here. Perpetual Timepiece, I play this card more than maybe anyone who's ever lived, but it goes perfect in here because it's a 2-mana artifact that taps to mill 2, and you can pay 2 and exile it to shuffle any number of target cards from your graveyard into your library. That's cool. If we're filling the graveyard, if someone tries to grave hate us, instead of having them exiled, we can at least put them back in my deck. It does still set you back a while, but I'm just glad it has that extra mode on it. But really, we are trying to make it so that the Triad doesn't cost 10. If we can get that cost down to 4, we're in business, because then we just need to get that 30 mana value worth of stuff. Hopefully the play pattern is play this for 4, activate. Get rid of 30 mana value of things and then just win.
Perpetual Timepiece, you love that card.
I just can't get enough.
Being able to shuffle things back, I feel like is one of the most important parts. I have milled myself almost to the brink of death, but this is one of the cards that has saved me from it.
Yeah, next we can go to a card that I think is pretty objectively poorly designed, is Grinding Station, but it works perfect here. 2-mana artifact, tap, sacrifice an artifact, target player mills 3. And that's totally fine, but it says whenever an artifact enters, you may untap this artifact. That's also a fine ability to have, but I'm just talking about for no reason other than what I'm assuming is an oversight. This card triggers itself. So when it comes into play, it says, hey, untap Grinding Station. So you get a free activation off that. This does require some rinky-dink artifacts, maybe a Solemn Simulacrum, maybe a Scampering Surveyor to sacrifice to get that going, but it is a really good outlet for milling. And if someone tries to, I don't know, wipe your board of artifacts, you can pretty much stack all of them if you get a little crafty.
You're also having a colorless deck. How many things are you really going to be putting in here? I feel like artifacts are the biggest kind of engine for this type of thing because they're the easiest to get, not only in the graveyard, but just easiest to get. You're not having that many colorless sagas in here, and the amount of colorless legendaries are slim to none in comparison to all the other legendary things.
Right, plus right before you're going to use that 30 mana value, just stack the Grinding Station. It's not that important. It's just a good way to hopefully get 9 to 12, 13 if you count itself, artifacts and the historic stuff in the graveyard to trigger your commander's emblem ability. But that brings us to our next card, which is Glaring Fleshraker. I think this is just kind of a great Magic card, especially for an uncommon. It's 2 and a colorless for a 2/2. Whenever you cast a colorless spell, you get a 0/1 spawn that sacks for mana, and whenever another colorless creature enters that spawn, it deals 1 damage to each opponent. So this is a little way to trickle in some damage. Also helps ramp into stuff, triggers off of basically everything you do, and once you get the emblem, now those spawns are 9/9s, and it just sort of does everything you can hope for.
Yeah, they have the mana, they have the beats if you have that emblem, and just being able to have just a bunch of little bodies. I feel like that's just really important with certain decks like these. Certain artifacts might just be like, okay, well, I have a lot of artifacts, but I don't have a lot of creatures. I'm susceptible to combat damage. Not here. You can use those for mana, and then you can use them for block if you want, and then they grow to be really, really big, and they're just dealing damage when they enter too. This is just triggering off your entire deck.
Yeah, just keep an eye on token makers, and this, I'm going to say this really quick because we talk about this a lot, but Threefold Thunderhulk goes ham in this deck because when you play it, it's a 12/12 that makes 12 9/9s.
Yeah,
with the emblem, like ridiculous. I mean, Threefold Thunderhulk always is a treat. But Gyria Sanitarium is the next actual card I want to talk about because it's a legendary land and it taps for colorless, or you can pay 2 and tap it to have each player draw, then discard. And I like that it's a legendary land because it counts as a historic card in the graveyard. That does not matter for exiling 30 mana value, but it does matter for reducing the cost of the triad. So if you discard it or mill it for some reason, keep in mind that's a very real cost reduction.
You also like this a lot because it's your most group huggy card that you actually play because it's not real group hug. It helps you the best, but I also like the fact that you can tap it immediately for colorless.
Right, and in a pinch, end step, you can draw, discard like a 12 drop. We have plenty of those in the deck, surely, and it helps fuel that emblem thing. Even if you do that, you drop discard a 10 drop. That's a third of the way there. I think this 30 mana value thing is like pretty easy. And it's part of why I want to build this deck because it just looks so freaking awesome. Since you're colorless, you're going to play one of the most no-brainer auto-include colorless cards ever, Forsaken Monument. It's 5-mana artifact. Colorless creatures you control will get +2/+2. Whenever you tap a permanent for colorless, like every land you could ever play, you get an additional colorless. And whenever you cast a colorless spell, you gain 2 life. It just seems like a no-brainer.
Everything is going to tap for colorless. Your Soul Ring tapping for 3 mana, that's pretty nasty. All of your stuff tapping for 2, that's awesome. But being able to get that additional +2/+2, if you have that emblem, that just seems like overkill at that point.
I know, but we'll take it. We'll make everything 11/11s. But we have to move on to my favorite legendary creature recently. Who do we got?
Oh, his name? It's Michael Synth Golem, as you can see over here. He's 11 for a 4/5, affinity for artifacts though, which means he costs 1 less to cast for each artifact you control, and artifact creature spells you cast have affinity for artifacts. This makes things very cheap, especially if you can make tokens very quickly, and in the graveyard he counts for 11, which is more than a third of what you need to chunk down for that emblem.
Yeah, getting to play an 11 drop in your deck without any of the downsides of paying 11 for it ever. I think the thing's going to cost like 5 at the very most, or you just loot it away or mill it and you're just super happy that you did. Michael Synth, pretty sweet guy. We've seen a lot of him lately. He's in your Mendicant Core deck, and you made a copy of him. And I just like drew the token. I was like, Michael Synth, Golem. He seems like a respectable gentleman, and he's super respectable in this deck. He's gonna make things really bad for your opponents. They're gonna think, oh, Capitoline Triad, that's really cool, and you're like, play it on turn 5, emblem, and they're like, wait, no.
Yeah, what are your thoughts about exiling Michael Synth, the man of the hour?
It has to be done. I'm sorry, Michael, but you're just too much mana value. Next up is a really, really weird card, and I'm going to let you read it.
The next one is Primacon Sky Rampart. White, blue, red for a 1/5 flying defender. As he enters, you choose left or right. Each player may attack only the nearest opponent in the chosen direction, and planeswalkers controlled by that opponent. I feel like this is super weird, and there are so many ways that you can take this, whether you choose confusing them with left or right, or just making it so like toughness matters. There are a bunch of ways to be taking this deck, but all of them are pretty weird, especially for Jeskai.
I mean, choose left or right. You can only attack the person of that direction. Like, okay, Primacon, this card it was like a meme when it came out, but I gotta respect just how ridiculous and unique this card is, while also still being relevant. There's like the grandeur cards, like, well, that's really unique, but they suck. They don't do anything in Commander. This actually does do stuff. You can take advantage of it. You can build around it. And there's some nasty stuff we can get into. Firstly, Ghostly Prison. I don't advocate for this card very often, but it says creatures that can't attack you unless their controller pays 2 for each creature they control. You gotta really fill into the character when you play Commander, and this is who you are. When you're playing Primacon, you might as well tax the person who has to attack you, the only person who can, with a Ghostly Prison.
I think it's just fitting because you're only looking at one person. It's basically 1v1 at that point. You're like, I'm looking at you and I can see that you don't have mana, so I'm picking you and putting down this Ghostly Prison. You won't be able to attack me. And if you don't want to attack, how about Spark Double? You can copy Primacon and then make sure he comes in with an additional +1/+1 counter. That doesn't matter though, because you're going to choose like right for one of them, left for the other. And the ruling says if there are 2 Primacons that can't agree, nobody can attack.
That's so funny. When you showed me that, I was like, this is hilarious. 2 Pramicons, you do have to have Spark Double, some kind of non-legendary copy of it, because they're commanders, so one of them would go away. But yeah, with this, it's just a second non-legendary version. They're both saying he went that way, and the creatures just go, forget it, I'll just attack later. And that's so funny to me, and I think that just leads right into utter nonsense, like Azor's Elocutors, 3 white-blue hybrid for a 3/5 at the beginning of your upkeep. Put a filibuster counter on it, and then if it has 5, you win the game. But whenever a source deals damage to you, you have to remove a filibuster counter. This card sucks, but if no one can attack, you just keep racking up those filibusters, and all of a sudden, you've talked too much and you've yapped your way to a victory.
I feel like you need weird win cons for this. And of course there's things like Approach of the Second Sun, but Azor's Elocutors? There we go. Elocutors. That is one of the ones that you can only be playing in this deck.
This next one I had to read twice. It's Suppressor Skyguard, 2 white-blue for a 2/4 flyer. Whenever a player attacks you, if that player has another opponent who isn't being attacked, prevent all combat damage that will be dealt to you this combat. So if Mia attacks me and one other person each with a 1/1, I'm not going to take any damage because she was supposed to attack everybody, each of my other opponents. Okay, that's difficult to read, but I think this card's actually pretty sweet. And I remember when it came out, I think in the clue set, I had my eye on it, but I totally forgot about it until right now. So even if you're not playing the absolute most like sinister Pramicon nonsense deck, maybe this is one to consider as like a political thing.
I mean, this just fits in so well. It's like, all right, well, I guess nothing can really hurt me because there's another guy over there that you didn't attack because you can't. And, well, you can only attack me. Don't worry about it. No hard feelings.
Yeah, with Pramicon, it just says you can't take damage. It's so ridiculous. This is so funny. Oh, man. This next one, Ephemerate, white for an instant. Exile something, then bring it back. And it has Rebound. Just when they think that they figured out your plan and they've all colluded so that the person to your right or to your left can take you out, you just go, all right, beginning of combat, flicker Pramicon, choose the opposite direction. Not only does it save you for a turn, but it can really mess with their plans. It's so goofy.
It just really makes it so that you are always in control, especially for so cheap. It's like, oh, you got me? No, you don't. Go back the other way.
You know, the real mind game is that they know that this has Rebound, and they know you're going to target Pramicon next turn. But are you going to switch directions, or are you going to choose the same direction?
I've seen Pramicon in games before, and people are like trying to make deals with that person, like, please don't pick me, please don't pick like left. But if Pramicon can't stay out on the field because he is a very big target, how are you not going to get attacked? Things like Taunt from the Rampart is very awesome. 3 white-red for a sorcery. Go to all creatures your opponents control. Until your next turn, those creatures can't block. This is good with or without Pramicon on the battlefield, because if he's on the battlefield, that's just going to be a ton of direct damage to their face. If he's not in the battlefield, though, at least they're not coming at you.
Yeah, it kind of turns all your opponent's creatures into like this weird fireball where you just add up the total power, and you know that without a board wipe, that amount of power is going to be divided in some way across all of your opponents. Super, super funny. And in some cases, maybe you're the one with the beatdowns, because it does essentially say all of your creatures are unblockable this turn because nothing can block. So maybe you throw down a High Alert, which is 1 white-blue for an enchantment. It says each creature you control assigns combat damage equal to its toughness rather than its power, and creatures you control with Defender can attack as though they didn't have that. For some reason, you can pay 4 mana to untap target creature. I never knew why that was on there, but we can use Pramicon to beat down for 5, you know, to the person to our left or to our right.
Hey, you're the one deciding which way you can go, and this is what I was alluding to a little bit earlier, where it's like, you can make this toughness matters, too. You don't have to strictly build it as like a, ooh, well, you can't touch me. It's like, I guess you could also do Jeskai Butts Matter.
Jeskai Walls, and then you can, like, sort of forego some of the Pillow Fort stuff and just play a bunch of Wall of Omens, so the person to your right is like, what am I supposed to do? Well, and you're like, die. That's what you're supposed to do.
Well, I mean, what other wall commander is there? I feel like this is the best one.
There's Arcades. Arcades is one. There's a couple, like Doran is a little bit wall adjacent, but this is like...
This is the best one.
The absolute meme lord. I think if Pramicon would wear a hat, it would be this propeller hat for sure. And if you want to know where... I'm sorry you can't buy propeller hats here, but you can buy Magic cards through Moxfield if you want to purchase a deck. You can just click right on the link, because Moxfield's got basically everything you can ever need.
Yeah, they have everything. And if you want to purchase one of our decks directly, you can go to our lists, check them out, and then if there are 8 cards, you can add them to your cart from Moxfield.
Wow, everything's overlapped. You can buy Card Kingdom cards through Moxfield. They just let you do everything. They let you do everything. And we're going to go to the next, maybe our most controversial card on this list. This commander is Avacyn, Angel of Hope, 5 white for an 8/8 with flying, vigilance, and indestructible, and other permanents you control also have indestructible. You know, there's a couple things floating around. Odric maybe can give indestructible for a turn. What's his name? be something guy. What's this guy? The Lord of the Rings guy. Bertram? Yeah, sure. He can give indestructible and have the ring tempt you, but only for a turn. I don't think there's anything out there that just gives indestructible. You know, our boy 1-800-Are-You-Flappin' Zatulpa has indestructible. It can hit for 8. But I think this is the biggest, splashiest version we've seen.
I feel like with Avacyn too, it's just all of your permanents, including her, are indestructible. And that just makes for a lot of big things. Like Armageddon. I feel like Armageddon is just the hallmark spell of this because you're just going to destroy all lands, but not yours. Don't worry about it because she and all of your lands are indestructible.
And that 1-2 punch, that's game over. There's no stopping that. And I don't think there's any other commander that just says, hey, do this and you win. Like, I mean, Armageddon does win games, but not too many commanders make it completely one-sided. There's also Pearl Medallion. We got an 8-drop in the command zone, so we got to make sure our white spells cost 1 less to cast, and a 2-mana investment is really, really good. I think if you're this monocolored or sometimes 2-color decks, it's really easy to play these medallions. If you're casting 2 spells per turn, which is easier with this, it's like a 2-mana signet that makes 2 mana. Like, we don't have that.
Also, 8 mana is a lot to be paying for a commander nowadays, so you want to get there as fast as possible. You need a bunch of those mana ramping, cost reducing artifacts to get to that before turn 8. There's also Mother of Runes because while she has indestructible, Avacyn doesn't have hexproof or anything, so she's very susceptible to removal. It's white for a 1/1, tap and target creature you control gains protection from the color of your choice until end of turn. There's going to be a lot of things coming at Avacyn because of all of these destructive spells that you're playing, so you better give her a little bit of protection too.
Mother of Runes is really annoying, and if you haven't played with it a ton, it's like way more annoying than it looks, because if they play Mother of Runes on turn 1, as soon as they untap with it, your first instinct is, I'm not going to be able to kill Avacyn, so I'll kill the Mother of Runes. But they can tap it and give Mother of Runes the protection from something. So it's almost immune. You kind of have to have 2 removal spells if you want to get rid of the mom. And it's just a hassle. It's definitely a hassle. You could also go the Commander's Plate route, a 1-mana equipment that equips commanders for 3. And equip creature gets +3/+3 and has protection from each color that's not in your commander's color identity. This is important for a lot of reasons. First of all, pro everything but white, pretty great. Makes it really hard to block. But also gives us a critical 11 power, because 11 is the lowest amount of power you can have on a commander that 2-shots somebody. So now 2 strikes with Avacyn and you're dead.
Avacyn is such an easy commander to begin commander damage with because vigilance, flying, and if you can just bump her power up just a little bit, you can get into that 2-hit kill range. That's such a good place to be.
I think one of the other things that you're going to find as a problem with Avacyn is obviously she's like the biggest, scariest thing on the board. But protection and indestructible doesn't save you from the cards that we love the very, very most. Soul Shatter, Flare of Malice, etc. Shadowgrange Archfiend. There's like 8 of them now. But you can use Galadriel's Dismissal, a white for an instant, that kicks for 2 and a white, to have target creature, maybe Avacyn, phase out. And if the spell was kicked, each creature target player controls phases out instead. So you can save your whole board in response to something, or if you just want to kill somebody and you're down to a 1v1, just phase out all their blockers.
I really like how modal this is, whether it is phasing out everyone's blockers, saving your best creature, or phasing out your entire board if you really need that in a pinch. You can also, you don't have to take a very destructive route with Avacyn too. You can also go Angels if you want. Giada, Font of Hope is one of the mana dorks you'll see in this. 1 white for a 2/2 flying Vigi. Each other angel gets +1/+1 counter for each angel you already control. Tap to add white, but only for an angel spell. This is a much nicer route than going the Armageddon route, but it is also a very viable route for Avacyn.
I think it's pretty cool. It's nice to say like Avacyn is the leader of the angels. That makes practical sense. Fun note about Giada, I don't know too many other Magic cards that say the word already in the Oracle, and I love seeing a really weird word like that pop up because it makes me think of like, what else says that? You could also go a big old angel, Sarah's Emissary, 4 white for a 7/7 flyers and enters. Choose a card type, and you and all your creatures have protection from that thing. If you choose creature, you don't take damage from creatures. It's a pretty sweet deal. And if you're super worried about Swords to Plowshares, choose instant, and now you can bash in.
Very, very flexible. And Sarah's Emissary, I feel like it's just one of those cards where some decks can't beat it.
Yeah.
If there's a very creature-heavy green deck across from you, and they just can't block your stuff at that point. They can't really remove anything either. They might have 1 or 2 instants rocking around in their deck. But other than that, you're like, all right, hit you for 11 commander, plus with Sarah's Emissary on the field, and you can't swing back or, hit me on the crackback.
Yeah, this card makes, board stalls. It eats board stalls for breakfast. I think that's on the back of the card. Maybe that's the flavor text, is I eat board stalls for breakfast. Next up, another Universe is Beyond Doctor Who card. This is just Just bizarre, and that's perfect for this video because it's the Master multiplied 4 red black for a 4/3 with Myriad. The legend rule doesn't apply to creature tokens you control, and triggered abilities you control can't cause you to sacrifice or exile, you guessed it, creature tokens you control. This wants something very specific, and it totally fits the theme of that episode with the Master. He turns everyone on the planet into himself, and it made no sense. At least this card makes some sense.
I don't know. I feel like it makes sense because I feel like you would do that too if you were given the option. There would just be 10,000 billion beezies rocking around.
I just feel like I have bigger fish to fry. I don't know. I don't know why that was a priority for him, but he got a kick out of it.
But because of the legendary rule not applying, that happens on so few cards, and when we see it, it's usually on things like Sakashima, where it's like, okay, this only doesn't apply for like this one in particular. But you know, how many mirror box effects do we really get?
I don't know, but I love the idea of these. The Master multiplied's literally multiplying. He makes 2 myriads that don't go away, and then they all have myriads, so they're going to make 2, 2, 2, and it's just really goofy. Fellow to the third path is going to be crucial to this deck because he's 1 red for a 2/3, 2 red tap. You get a token that's a copy of a creature in your graveyard, except it's an artifact, and it has haste, and you sacrifice it at the end step. But not with the Master out. You just get to stack these and you can keep making the same thing if you want.
There are just so many ways you're going to be able to be making tokens very cheaply in this deck, and then since you can't sack or exile them, which most tokens require you to do at the beginning of the next end step, you're going to just be having them on the field like, okay, well, what do you want me to do right now? There's also determined iteration that plays along with this. 1 in a red for an enchantment. At the beginning of combat on your turn, populate. The token created this way gains haste, but you sack at the beginning of the next end step. But if Master's out, no, you don't.
Yeah, I think you're going to have to attack with Master one time, get the tokens, and the next turn when you go to combat, you'll have some myriad Master tokens, and you can just go, +1. So this is definitely a deck that you're going to want to protect the Master, because I think your deck kind of doesn't do anything, or it's at least half as good if you don't have the Master in play. So just keep an eye on that, pack your deflecting spots for sure. And you're going to use things like Combat Celebrant, because you want to mitigate the amount of wait time you're going to have. Saying just you wait till I untap, and then I get 2 more Masters, and then just you wait till I untap, I get 6 more Masters. It's scary in theory, but that's a long way to wait. So if you just use Combat Celebrant, 2 in a red, 4/1, if this creature hasn't been exerted this turn, you may exert it as it attacks. When you do, untap all your guys and you get an extra combat phase. Now we could sort of skip some of the waiting time and beat the crap out of people.
Yeah, if you can do it at beginning of combat on your turn and you keep making these, you can just get infinite combat steps.
Yeah, if you have a token of it and you've even just that other card we just talked about, what is it? The Determined Iteration. I knew that. I had it in my head. If you just do that, boom, infinite. This is definitely an infinite level card. Kiki Jiki's another one. If you can just make repeatable boys, hey man, that's infinite exerts. And we also have Mordor on the March, a card I'm going to read for the first time right now. 3 black-red for a sorcery. Exile a creature card from your graveyard. You get a token that's a copy of it. It gains haste until end of turn. Exile it at the beginning of the next end step. Oh, it has Storm. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, for 5 mana, it better have Storm. That's pretty bad for 5 mana if you just exile it and you only get 1 of them. But if you can cast this and just get a bunch of other little casts, if you're casting a bunch of the 1 and 2 mana of okay, create a copy.
Maybe a Soul Ring, yeah.
Yeah, and then you're just building up for this big one and you're making a bunch of copies out of it. That's super awesome for this deck.
But Mia, what might be we making copies of? Maybe a Terror of the Peaks?
Yeah.
3 red, 5/4, flying. Spells that cast to target it cost an additional 3 life. And whenever another creature you control enters, this creature deals damage equal to that creature's power to any target. That one?
I feel like that's a pretty good one. I feel like if you want to go infinite, there is the Combat Celebrant route and the Kiki Jiki route. But if you don't, copying something like Terror of the Peaks is really going to end the game very fast.
Yeah, I mean, 1 Terror of the Peaks is a force to be reckoned with. But as soon as you make a second one, that triggers the first one. And now if you play another Terror of the Peaks, it triggers both of them. And from there, it doesn't really take that many extra Terror of the Peakses to end things. And I think, like what you were talking about, you can go the other way. You can win with Combat Celebrant with a Mirage Phalanx. I know this card goes infinite with that. 4 red, 4/4 Soul Bond. As long as it's paired with another creature, which happens when either this or something else enters the battlefield unpaired. Each of those creatures has, at the beginning of combat on your turn, you get a token that has all the keywords you want. I'm not going to read all the things that are the same. But hey, man, extra Master, perfect. Legend Rule doesn't apply. Let's go. Let's get that haste. Let's get that Myriad. Or Combat Celebrant, win the game.
If Master stays out, you're going to flood the board immediately. There are just so many ways to be making copies. And yes, you just better be putting in your Tibalt's Trickeries and your Imp's Mischiefs.
To protect him because he's such a lightning rod. If you haven't seen that episode and you want to play this deck, I would highly recommend looking up the laugh he does. I don't know if the BBC or whoever couldn't get this actor to do more laughs, but they kind of just play the same 2 or 3 laughs over and over. If you could get that on like a little bit of a soundboard and you just play that noise like on a Magic Arena whenever you make a master, your opponents are going to hate you and it's going to be hilarious.
Yeah, that seems like something you would do. But you can make copies of things like Rihanna, Fire Dancer, 3 red for a 3/4. At the beginning of combat on your turn, create X tokens that are copies of another target creature you control, where X is 1 plus the number of instant and sorcery cards you've cast this turn. So it always creates 1 bare minimum. They gain haste and you exile them at the beginning of the next end step, but no you don't. I feel like with Rihanna, it's just, this is one of the cards where the legend rule needed to apply, but if you can keep making copies of this, you're going to be making so many more copies of everything else.
Yeah, Rihanna can't copy herself because that would be weird, but like there's plenty of other ways in the deck. We just talked about Phalanx, the Mirage Phalanx. We just talked about that, and that just kind of like, you're going to be pointing to cards that are making cards, like minions making minions making minions making masters, and your opponents are going to have no idea what's going on, and you can just say, trust me, bro, you're dead, and that's going to be perfect. I think we got a really good suite of off-the-wall commanders for this, so hopefully you enjoyed it, and if you want to know how I got this propeller hat, it's actually only a 4-minute video. Thank you for that so much. We talk about the Aether Drift precons, and you can see where this comes from.